Switch back again. That way I don't take anything from the video. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and get this video started, and then I'm gonna mute myself. We're gonna go in 3, 2, 1, go.
Right number. Quicker.
We made it.
Yeah. Thank you. And of course, you know that you'll be. Yes.
He is arguably the most famous person in history. Over 2 billion people claim to follow him. That's 1/3 of the world's population. He's represented in art and literature more than any other figure. Time magazine called him the most influential person who has ever lived. But who is Jesus?
Who is Jesus?
He's a character in the Bible.
He has something to do with God. Long hair, wears a white robe.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know how to answer that.
I've never personally met him, but I know a lot of people have.
He was a prophet, one of them, one of the many.
A nice guy from the Middle East.
I believe Jesus is the Son of God.
An everyday guy.
A man of conviction.
He knows what it feels like to be human, to be rejected.
The friend of those that are often mocked.
I don't know. A man
Yeah,
who lived
he existed.
at one point.
Nobody knows who Jesus is, let me tell you.
33-year-old carpenter from the Middle East.
That's like a dude that, like, in the Bible says he died for us.
Paved a way for us to live differently.
He was somebody, he did live, right? But who he was to you is different.
I think Jesus is just a symbol. It has symbolism. Jesus is my savior.
But he could also really be a good friend.
He's relatable to me.
He's my everyday chance at life. The creator of all. That's why I believe this is the reason why we're all here. Yeah.
For much of my life, I wasn't a Christian. I come from a family of trial lawyers, barristers. My father was a barrister, my mother was a barrister, my sister is a barrister, my son qualified as a barrister, my daughter qualified as a barrister, both my grandfathers on both sides were barristers, my uncle was a barrister. If we'd had a cat, it would definitely have been a barrister. My father was a Jew, a secular Jew. He escaped the Holocaust. Many of his family had died in the Holocaust. My mother was not a churchgoer. My father described himself as an agnostic. And I came to the conclusion that I was an atheist as a teenager. And I was quite an argumentative atheist. Not that I was out to convert people to atheism, but if anyone tried to convert me to Christianity, then I had a lot to say on the subject. And I was quite suspicious of Christians. I'd come across one or two of them in my gap year, and they had these smiles, which I found deeply suspicious. And in my first year at university, I had a room next door to my great friend, Nicky Lee. And I warned him against these Christians. I said, don't let them into your room, whatever you do. But it was too late. He'd met some, and one time he and his then girlfriend, now his wife, Scylla, came back and they said that they had become Christians. I was horrified. I mean, they were such lovely people. I thought, how can I help them? I really didn't know anything about it, so I thought, I better investigate. So I managed to find this old Bible, and that night I started reading it. I started beginning of the New Testament. I read Matthew's Gospel, Mark, Luke. I got about halfway through John's Gospel, about 3 in the morning. I fell asleep. Following day, I carried on reading. All that day, all the next day, all the day afterwards. I was a student, so I didn't have any work to do. And when I got to the end of the New Testament, I came to the conclusion, it's true. You can't prove Christianity mathematically. You can't prove it scientifically. Science is obviously very important, but science answers a different set of questions. Science asks the questions, when and how did this world come into being? But it can't answer the question, who and why. Supposing I had a cake here, which I've made, and I give it to a scientist. The scientist will be able to answer the question, how it was made. They may be able to tell you when it was made, but only I can tell you who made it and why I made it. Only the creator of the cake can do that. Only I can tell you, I made that cake, and I can tell you why I made that cake. And it's the same with this universe. Only the creator can reveal who made this world and why he made it. And the claim of Christianity is that he has done that. The creator has revealed himself. And he's revealed himself in the person of Jesus. And the evidence is not scientific evidence, that's not the only kind of evidence, but historical evidence. When I was a barrister, that's what we relied on. We relied on historical evidence that we presented to a jury. It was things that had happened in the past. They weren't there. Every time a jury brings back a verdict, it's a step of faith based on evidence. And I myself could not be a Christian if I didn't believe there was evidence. I couldn't just take a blind leap of faith. For me, faith in Jesus is a step of faith based on good historical evidence. Why start with Jesus, you might say? I didn't even believe there was a God. But I came to believe in God through Jesus, because the resurrection of Jesus strongly suggests that this world has a creator, and that that creator is to be seen in terms of, through the lens of, Jesus.
Jesus of Nazareth is believed to have walked these streets around 2,000 years ago. But is there any evidence that he even existed?
Well, there's actually quite a lot of evidence. No serious historian would deny that Jesus existed. The Roman historians Tacitus and Suetonius wrote about Jesus, as did the first century Jewish historian Josephus. He described him as Jesus, a doer of wonderful works, and then he goes on to describe his crucifixion and alleged resurrection.
So there's evidence outside of the New Testament for the existence of Jesus, but most of the evidence comes from within inside the New Testament. And sometimes people say, well, the New Testament was written such a long time ago. How do we know what was written down hasn't been changed over the years? Well, the answer is that we do know, because of a science called textual criticism.
Textual criticism examines the number of copies of early texts that we have available to us today, and it looks at the time gap between the original document and the earliest copy that we have. And basically, the more manuscripts we have and the earlier they are, the less doubt there's going to be about the original. So let's compare the Bible to other texts in ancient history, ones that are widely used in schools and universities. Let's look at the Greek historians Herodotus and Thucydides. They both wrote in the 5th century BC. But the earliest copy of their writings that we have dates from AD 900, and that makes a 1300-year time lapse. And even then, we only have 8 copies of these manuscripts in the first place. Or look at the Roman historian Tacitus. There's a 1,000-year gap between his book being written and our first manuscript, and we only have 20 copies. Or another classic, Caesar's Gallic War, 950 years between the book being written and our first manuscript copy. And even then, we only have 9 or 10 copies of these manuscripts. Again, with Livy's famous History of Rome, a 900-year gap between the book being written and our first manuscript, and we only have 20 copies of this. But when it comes to the New Testament, well, it's very different. The New Testament was written between about 40 and 100 AD, and we have manuscript evidence going back as early as 130 AD, and full manuscripts by 350 AD. And we have more than 5,300 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 Latin translations, and 9,300 others. So, we can be pretty confident in the accuracy, the authenticity, and the integrity of the New Testament scriptures that have been passed down to us today. The remarkable thing about the Bible is there's such a short chronological distance between the events being described and our first manuscripts. So in many ways, the Bible scholars are in a very fortunate position of being able to check these things out and finding that they are much more reliable than, for example, some of the alternatives you're looking at. And as a scholar, I am more than happy to say I trust this, I take it very, very seriously, I rely on it.
Professor F.J.A. Hort, one of the greatest scholars in the area of textual criticism, concluded that, in the variety and fullness of the evidence on which it rests, the text of the New Testament stands absolutely and unapproachably alone amongst ancient prose writings, and no secular historian would disagree with that conclusion.
So we know from evidence outside and inside the New Testament that Jesus existed. But who was he? Well, we know that he was fully human. He had a human body. He ate, he drank, he sweated, he got tired, he suffered pain. And he had human emotions, love, joy, sadness, and human experiences. He had the experience of growing up in a family, of education, of having a job, of being tempted. And he experienced bereavement and suffering and torture and even death.
Many today would say, okay, he was a human being, but only a human being. Maybe he was a great religious teacher, but no more than that. Others would say he was much more than that.
Bono, the lead singer of the band U2, has said, I don't think you're led off easily by saying he was a great thinker or philosopher, because actually he went around saying he was the Messiah. That's why he was crucified. He was crucified because he said he was the Son of God. So he either, in my view, was the Son of God or he was nuts. And I find it hard to accept that all the millions and millions of lives, half the earth, for nearly 2,000 years, have felt their lives touched and inspired by some nutter. I don't believe it. He went on to say, I believe that Jesus was the Son of God.
What evidence is there to suggest that Jesus was more than just a great religious teacher? There are two parts to this argument. The first is, what did Jesus think about himself? Because if Jesus didn't think he was God, that's the end of the argument. But if he did, the second part of the argument is, was he right? So, what did Jesus say about himself? First piece of evidence is the fact that his teaching was centered on himself. Most great religious teachers point away from themselves. They say, don't look at me, look at God. Jesus, who personified humility in pointing people to God, pointed to himself. He said, look at me, come to me. We've talked about this search for meaning and purpose, that feeling of like a spiritual hunger that other things don't quite satisfy. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. I'm the one who can satisfy that spiritual hunger. Addiction is a major problem in our society. Jesus said, if the Son, in other words, if he himself sets you free, you will be free indeed. Then there's all the stuff we carry around, worry, anxiety, guilt, fear. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He said, if you receive me, you receive God. If you welcome me, you welcome God. If you've seen me, you've seen God.
Forgiveness is right at the heart of Christianity. Jesus went up to people and said, your sins are forgiven. Now, if someone sins against you, then you can forgive them, but you can't just walk up to anyone and say your sins are forgiven. When Jesus said that, the lawyers said, who can forgive sins but God alone? But Jesus claimed to be able to do that. In fact, Jesus said that he came to give his life so that people could be forgiven.
One of the most direct claims Jesus made is recorded in John's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 30. Jesus said, I and the Father are one. Now, making a claim like this was seen by the religious leaders to be blasphemy. It's tantamount to a claim to be God, and it was punishable by death by stoning. People picked up stones to stone him. Then Jesus said to them, I've shown you many great miracles from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? We're not stoning you for any of these, they replied, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere human being, claim to be God.
I think when you look at all the evidence, it's clear that Jesus did make that claim. It is an astonishing claim. And a claim like that needs to be tested. If you think about it, there are only 3 possibilities. It was not true, and Jesus knew perfectly well it wasn't true, in which case he was a fraud. Or it was not true, and he simply didn't realize it. He genuinely thought he was the Son of God, in which case he was deluded. I think we'd say he was insane. But logically, there is only one other possibility, and that is, it's true. He was telling the truth. C.S. Lewis, Cambridge professor, best known as the author of the Chronicles of Narnia, he put it like this: a man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He'd either be insane or else he'd be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else insane or something worse. But let's not come up with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He hasn't left that open to us. He didn't intend to.
So was Jesus right in what he said about himself? What evidence is there to support his claims? Well, the first piece of evidence is his teaching. Much of the New Testament records numerous occasions where crowds gather to hear Jesus teach.
And on one occasion, on a mountain like this, more than 5,000 people gathered to listen to the teaching of Jesus. The Sermon on the Mount has been widely acknowledged amongst the greatest teaching of all time. Jesus' teaching has been the foundation of our entire civilization. Many of our laws were originally founded on Jesus' teaching.
Love your neighbour as yourself. Do to others as you would have them do to you. And then this, totally revolutionary. Love your enemies.
In fact, we've advanced in every field of science and technology, yet in 2,000 years, no one has ever improved on the moral teachings of Jesus. They are the greatest words ever spoken. They're the kind of words you might expect God to speak. Another thing that marked Jesus' life was his love for the marginalized, feeding the hungry, healing the sick. His character has impressed millions who wouldn't call themselves Christians. Time magazine called him the most persistent symbol of purity, selflessness, and love in the history of Western humanity. He was a person in whom even his enemies could find no fault, and whose friends said that he was without sin. It's been said that our character is truly tested when we're under pressure or in pain. And when Jesus was being tortured, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing."
Another piece of evidence is his fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. No one else in history has had a whole collection of books written about them before they were born. Jesus fulfilled over 300 Old Testament prophecies, 29 of them in a single day. Of course, it could be suggested he was a kind of clever con man who set out deliberately to deceive people. He read all these prophecies and he thought, right, I'm going to go through and I'm going to fulfill them all in my life. The difficulty with that theory is that, first of all, the sheer number of them. And then the fact that, humanly speaking, he had no control over many of these things. There were prophecies about the exact manner of his death, about the place of his burial, even about the place of his birth. Clever con man would be going around and say, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be born in Bethlehem. It's too late. Then the final piece of evidence, his conquest of death. The physical resurrection of Jesus is the cornerstone of Christianity. And this is relevant to every single one of us because we're all going to die. It's the ultimate statistic. 1 in 1 die. You go to a funeral. The coffin is lowered into the ground. It looks absolutely final. And it is. Unless Jesus died and was buried and then was raised to life. In which case, death has been conquered. But is this just wishful thinking?
I don't know.
I don't know if I believe that.
Totally rose from the dead.
Sure.
Possibly, if you wanted to.
I mean, are we talking in a physical sense or are we talking in a metaphorical sense?
No. It's mythological. Even though I'm Greek Orthodox and we're big on that.
Yeah, sure. If he rose to dead, like, great.
Definitely.
Me, no.
Yes.
I don't have an answer.
God's still working with me on that.
I could believe it, but I can't say 100% like that's what my faith is just based on.
I don't know. I've seen crazier things in my time.
I believe anything could happen.
Yes, absolutely. I do believe that he rose from the dead.
I think it's possible, but I don't know.
I believe that he did. I mean, there are so many people around him that claim that he rose from the dead.
I don't know. If he did, then that means Christianity is 100% real, so.
It would sure be nice to know that that was possible, because I would like to do that as well.
All I know is that miracles exist, and if that's definitely one, then I'm with it.
There are 4 pieces of evidence for the resurrection. The first is his absence from the tomb. No one has ever satisfactorily explained how Jesus' body was absent from the tomb that first Easter day. People have come up with all kinds of explanations. For example, maybe the authorities stole the body. Well, in that case, why didn't they produce it when people started saying that he'd risen from the dead? Or perhaps the robbers stole the body. But when the disciples heard that Jesus had been seen, they ran to the tomb, and they found that the tomb was not empty. Inside the tomb were the grave clothes that Jesus had been wrapped in.
The only valuable thing that a robber might have taken was still there. The grave clothes had collapsed like a caterpillar's cocoon when a butterfly has emerged. And the piece that had been around Jesus' head had been folded up and put in a different place. And when they saw that, they believed. The second was his presence with the disciples. Jesus was seen on more than 11 occasions. On one occasion, by a group of around 500 people. People say, well, it could have been a hallucination. Well, hallucination does happen among highly strung, very nervous or highly imaginative people, or people who are sick or on drugs. But the disciples don't fit any of those categories. They were cynics like Thomas. There were tough fishermen, there were tax collectors, and tax collectors do not hallucinate.
The third piece of evidence is the transformation that we see in the disciples. Here was a group of people who were disillusioned, despairing that their leader had died, and then suddenly they were transformed. They started saying, we've seen Jesus, he's really alive. And they went around telling everybody. Later on, practically all of them were killed, crucified, tortured, beheaded because of what they believed. And if they were deceiving people, all they had to do was say, no, it's not actually true. But they never said that because they knew it was true. It had totally transformed their lives. And as a result, this extraordinary movement swept around the whole known world. And it's a movement without precedent in the history of humanity. And fourth, it's still happening today.
There are now over 2.3 billion Christians around the world, of every ethnicity, continent, nationality, economic, social, and intellectual background. They all speak of this encounter with the risen Jesus Christ.
So what are we to make of Jesus? It seems to me clear that Jesus really did claim to be a man whose identity was God. And when we look at the evidence of his teaching, his life, his character, his fulfillment of prophecy, his resurrection, to say he was insane or a fraud seems to me absurd, illogical, actually unbelievable. On the other hand, it provides the strongest possible supporting evidence that what Jesus said about himself was true. And when I looked at the evidence, when I read the New Testament, I came to the conclusion it is true. I didn't want to become a Christian because I thought if I became a Christian, life would be totally miserable from that moment onwards. So I tried to put it off. I thought I'll put off becoming a Christian to my deathbed. And then I realized that would not be intellectually honest. So very reluctantly, I kind of said, okay, yes. And at that moment, I can still remember that moment so clearly. It dropped from here, from my head, being convinced it was true, to here in my heart, having an experience of a relationship with Jesus. And finding what, I guess looking back, unconsciously, I'd been searching for all my life. Something that provided ultimate meaning and purpose to my life. It was the very last place on earth that I expected to find it. But at that moment, I found that what Jesus said was true. Jesus said, I have come that you might have life, and life in all its fullness. It really is true that God has revealed himself in Jesus. Jesus really is who he claimed to be. Jesus really did rise from the dead. There is hope beyond this life. There is hope for this life. Right now, in this life, in an encounter with Jesus, we find life, and life in all its fullness.
You are muted, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. You are right. Sorry about that. But welcome, guys. If you guys were here throughout that video, what do you guys think of it? What stood out to you? Did it stand out to you? And I'd like to go ahead and just follow up with the video with the question that they asked in the video. I'll go ahead and put it in chat too. Do you believe Jesus rose from the dead? Like, we have a few people here. I don't know if you guys were here for the whole thing or not. This is day 2 of our alpha video series. One's titled "Who is Jesus?" We do have Discord that is open if anybody would like to be a part of that. There is the link for you guys that goes across to other platforms. Validate that in just a moment. I'll go ahead and just type it that way. Just sure it does. I wish all these little people that it shows on Twitch were actually in here, but I think a lot of them are unfortunately bots.
It's hard to see that. I'm seeing 3 viewers, but I suspect one of those is me. So
Yeah, one of them is probably you. But yeah, if you go into the mod view, you'll see so the number shows 3, but the list shows 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 12, 16 names.
nice.
So I'm quite confident that at least 4 of them are bots, if not all of them. Unfortunately. But you know, it is what it is. And we will be, of course, like we did last week, we'll clip this up, we'll put it on YouTube. So if anybody does have any questions, they stumble across this, they will have that opportunity to be able to do so. And like I said, I have to keep reminding myself that it isn't just about who we're reaching live. It's also about who we're reaching when we're not live. And you know, maybe that fruit doesn't come for months or even years, but it's out there at some point, and somebody will need it and use it, and it'll be there for them at the right time. Okay.
You guys are always welcome to jump in the Discord either now as we're live or in the future if you happen to catch this later on as after it's been posted and just ask us some questions.
Absolutely. This is meant to be an open dialogue for anybody that has any questions. If you're a believer of the Christian faith, maybe you don't have these questions anymore, but maybe you asked the question that you wished somebody asked or explained when you didn't know who Jesus was.
You know, maybe you're wondering, you saw the video or you tuned in late and you wonder who is Jesus? What do you think about him? I know this is something that I think anybody that has spent any time thinking about Jesus has asked themselves and wondered about. Was he real? Was he really a person? Did he exist in history?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely evidence there. They pointed out several bits of evidence in this particular series. A lot of those were also evidence that Lee Strobel used in his book, The Case for Christ, as he was a journalist that was also an atheist and came following the evidence, came to know Christ and accept that these things are indeed true.
I think it's a great question to wrestle with that and then to look at the evidence, the historical evidence we have. But I also think it's fascinating that today a lot of people say, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, Jesus was real. We accept that."
Mm-hmm.
But what's this a thing about him being the Son of God or being God? And I think it's interesting that when we look back at the early church and early on in Christianity, it was the opposite question. That a lot of people was like, "Oh, he was definitely because of the things he did, because of his miracles and his resurrection, because of the things he did, he was definitely God." But was he really human?
Which is really interesting because you listen to what a lot of people are putting out there, and it's like, oh, we know better today. We just thought otherwise back then. Well, back then they didn't believe it even more so than today because they considered it to be blasphemous. And of course, as the video pointed out, his disciples didn't just say this, but oftentimes in today's time, we're like, oh, this is a hill I'm willing to die on. Well, this is what those disciples really did. They're like, this is a hill I'm willing to die on. This is the truth. This is the Messiah. And we again, perfectly normal to wrestle with it. I think it's perfectly acceptable to ask questions. I think it's important to ask questions. And of course, if you guys do have those questions, please feel free to jump into our Discord. Let us know. We'd love to have this conversation with you. Not just during the series, but any given time. And again, this was this was episode 2. Who is Jesus? The next one is going to be why did Jesus die? So, if you're watching this on YouTube later after the stream and you're like, you know what, I want to follow up on that next Thursday, 7:30 Central time. That'll be May validate that, May 16th, 2014, or anybody that is date oriented.
Absolutely, and I hope to see you all there. Hope to see you tune in and check us out. Anytime you have questions or something comes up during the week, or you've watched this and you start thinking about it, and you're like, oh, well, what about this or what about that? Come on out and share it with us. Jump in that Discord and let us know. And we would love to hear your thoughts and hear your questions. And we're not saying we have all the answers, but we would love to explore and discuss things with you. And I'm thinking about this question about who is Jesus, and I have to say that within my own context, I have a little different story than a lot of people, because I don't have this big conversion story where I grew up doing this or doing that, and then one day I found God. I grew up in the church. I grew up always knowing who Jesus is, and always felt like he was in my life. But I did have some experiences in my life where I decided to get real with my faith. I decided to be serious about my faith, and when I made those decisions, that each time there were critical moments in my life where I had to remake that decision, or make it on a deeper level. Because sometimes we make decisions on, like, oh yeah, I'll do this, and then later on we'll make a decision like, okay, no, I'm really going to do this, and then later on we'll realize that, oh, I'm really going to do it, and I'm going even, and it's not that we didn't follow through with the decision before, but now we're getting more and more and more serious. We're devoting more time and energy and resources and more of ourselves to making that decision. And each time I've gone deeper in that decision, that it's been life changing, and that as he said in the video, that Jesus said who he was, and he said that he came to give you a life, and to give you a full life. Some scriptures translate it as abundant. Some scriptures translate it as powerful. Some people translate it as this life that is fulfilling, and that's really what I've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been a believer for a very long time, but I did not grow up in church. And I was lucky enough to have my martial arts instructor invite me to church during a healing revival, and I was told by the time I was in my 40s or 50s that I would be completely blind. And each year my eyes were getting worse, and they were getting worse. And, some people accepted that was just my fate. I during this healing revival, I decided, I was going to go up and get prayed over. And I decided this God thing, this Jesus, he's either real or he's not. Because in my mind, I was 12, 13 years old at the time. And I was like, the worst case scenario, I'll go up and nothing changes. Best case scenario, I find out that, this is real. Because in my mind, Jesus was this guy that was like Merlin. He had magic, and he could use it for good. And that was that. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. Very, very, very loose, vague, primitive beginning understanding of who he was, if even that. But of course, Scripture tells us that if we have the faith the size of a grain of mustard seed, then we can move mountains. And back then, that was all the faith I could muster. Is like, if this is real, great. If it's not, nothing changes. I'll be blind by the time I'm 40 or 50. And last time I went to the doctors, my eyes were 2015 in my right eye, 2010 the left. So, you know, went from being told I'd be blind to having better than perfect vision. And, you know, I give my glory to God. And the doctor, he couldn't figure it out either. And I think you actually might know the doctor as well. I don't know if you remember Mr. Yaney or not, but it was his dad.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so yeah, his dad was an eye doctor, and he was the one that gave us the news that that I'd be blind by the time I was 40 or 50.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that story.
Yeah. So, you know, I think it's amazing what God can do with so little. And I think as we're doing this, I'm very much a small streamer. I don't even actively try to monetize. If somebody wishes to donate, I'm not going to say no, because I don't want to take away their blessing while trying to bless me. I think that's double folded bad. Because one, I'm robbing them of their blessing, and two, it's just dumb to tell no to somebody that's trying to help you. So, but despite being a small streamer, I think this is going to reach who it needs to reach in the moments that it needs to reach them, and it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be for His glory, not mine. This isn't about clout for Billy Gilbert, or anything like that. This is about Jesus, and I hope that resonates with anybody that might be listening. I see we've got a few people between the various platforms. We've got a few on Twitch, a few on Rumble, and it looks like maybe a couple on YouTube as well. So, if you guys are here, feel free to chime in. We're here. This is open dialogue. We're gonna save this transcript for later. Again, just so anybody can watch it anytime. They can share it with their friends. They can share it with their family. And maybe you don't know who Jesus is today, but you catch this video later, or you just caught the video and you're like, let me explore this thing further. And that's what it's for. Trying to watch for the ads to pop up too, so if they do, I can sleep them real quick.
Yeah. Sometimes when we have that silence, I have that tendency to want to jump in and to fill it. But sometimes it's good to give people that opportunity to think, to contemplate, to sit in that silence for a minute and wrestle with that. And I think, I think of your story that you shared, how you had a Taekwondo instructor that invited you to a revival. And that reminded me of two other things. One was, there was a time when I got to know you, and I talked earlier about different levels of that commitment that I'd made and different experiences that took me deeper. And I would probably had my second experience, and I was, looking at myself back then and looking at the instructor that you were talking about. We were both Christians, but we were on polar opposites of how we lived out our faith. I mean, we both invited people to church, but there was me, that I was a self-righteous, holier than thou, arrogant jerk. Now, to the Taekwondo students, I was nice and I was kind and I was encouraging, but to people who I thought called themselves Christians and didn't live what I thought was the right life, or to people who I thought weren't good people.
Hmm.
I was not kind, and and one of those people is the person I'm imagining that was the instructor you were talking about, because I saw him wearing that Christian badge, and name, and talking to people about his faith. But then I also saw how he acted and how he lived his life when he wasn't in the spotlight, his life behind the scenes.
Hmm.
And it absolutely angered me.
I believe we're talking about the same person.
Yeah, because I had to cover for him when people who knew how he talked saw how he acted behind the scenes, and I had to find ways to say, oh, it's not like you think, or I had to I had to find ways to polish a turd, for lack of a better example.
Yeah, I get it.
And eventually my frustration with that is what led to us parting ways. We've since had a reconciliation. Um, so, there's no bad blood or ill will. But at that point in time, I wasn't mature enough. I was one of those. I was one of those jerk Christians that gave the faith a bad name. And on the other side, I saw him as somebody that gave us a bad name.
And I think that's interesting, given today my own personal devotion with my wife and my kids. Excuse me. We were talking about the haughty neck, and it sounds like I might be hearing a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, and I say all that to say is that I'm in a completely different place now. He's in a completely different place now. You're in a completely different place now. We're all in a completely different place. But I'm looking back, and there were people's lives who were affected and changed that didn't really know or understand those other sides of us. And I would say you're an example of that. You were influenced by him, and brought to the faith by him, despite his flaws. And
Yep.
there are people that I've talked to and met since then that were influenced and grew in their faith and had life-changing experiences despite my flaws. And I'm just thinking, if you're waiting to be perfect to find out about God, don't worry about that. And if you had some Christian at some point in time who was a hypocrite or who treated you bad, all right, that's not who Jesus was. Jesus gave us that perfect example. So I'm thinking, don't let somebody else's poor example turn you away.
Absolutely. And as you go through that, I think back to a younger version of me where a lot of people like to when it comes to how we talk, to reference Ephesians 4:29, which never did anything for me, because it's about building people up. And growing up in 18 years in the military, every other word I had started with an F or some kind of vulgarity to
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
And so, for those that don't know, I just posted it in chat, is let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And I think that's that did nothing for me. As a Christian, I was like, I could say that you're freaking awesome, but use the other word, and I'm building you up. I'm doing, we can lie to ourselves, and then God brought me to Colossians 3, and he's like, "What now, peasant?" Of course, he didn't say, "What now, peasant?" because he's full of mercy and grace and love, and everything that I try to be and fail at. But I think that's amazing how even in spite of our flaws, that God uses that, and he leverages that for his good and his glory and his purpose and his righteousness.
Absolutely.
I think we're about to a point where no one that watched has chimed in. Anybody else that gets here now has missed that moment. So if you guys haven't seen this video, hopefully you'll catch it on YouTube later. I'm going to clip the stream just for that segment, so that we can watch that later, whenever. Hey, we got a guy that just come in, Frank Tovey. Welcome, by the way. I'm a complete unbeliever. You follow what's real, science, logic, data. Don't believe in magic or creation or superficial stuff. What makes your specific God real without any doubt? Thank you for that question. We just actually finished up a video called "Who is Jesus?" and what they did in this video is they looked at the manuscripts and the evidence trail of what is there, and we look at all these stories that are historical, that people believe in, that are that were 1,000 years old when they were written about, but people still believe in them. But they don't believe in Jesus when it was written, as early as 30 years after his death. And I just, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being honest and sincere with your question. I very much appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And as for me, I don't know if you were here when I shared my testimony about my eyes, but what made me come to be a believer is I was told that I'd be blind by the time I was in my 40s or 50s. I was probably 12 years old, and each year my eyes did get worse. And I went to a healing revival, and I was like, I don't know if this God thing is real. I don't know if Jesus it's legit. I have nothing to lose to go up to this revival thing, and if it's real, awesome. If it's garbage, nothing changes, right? So I stepped out on that little bit of faith. Immediately, colors were more vibrant. I could see better. Couldn't see perfect, but better. And so I went back to the doctors. My eyes reverted back to what they were the previous year. Went back the next year. They reverted even better. And the last time I went to the doctors, I had 2015 in one eye and 2010 in the other. So for me, it was the act of healing and just stepping out and on faith, being vulnerable to test the waters, if that makes sense. And Ashen, how about you?
Man, it's, I'm looking at that, and to follow what is real, science, logic, data. And I have a friend, Billy Abraham, who wrote a book called The Logic of Evangelism, and he's fantastic at talking about science and logic and data when it pertains to our faith. And this is aside from the historical reality that Jesus was a real person, but who is God? And that we don't believe in magic or creation or supernatural stuff. and there are so many different ways to have conversations about this that could not be contained in here in just a few moments. I mean, we could talk about these kinds of things and the fascinating aspect of them, because I don't think that that science and faith are mutually exclusive. I think that we learn and grow through both of them, and that they help inform each other. So to think about that, but I still, for me personally, I tend to fall back to some supernatural experiences. There's this internal assurance of certain experiences, and then there are moments when things happen that defy the laws of nature. In my life, there have been times when I knew things that that I and were able to do things that I should not have known or been able to do. And then there is also this transcending sense of grace, of love, of peace, of joy that I keep finding myself returning to, even when I'm stressed, or uh, you know having a hard time dealing with all the pressures of life, I'm able to come back to this. And Thomas Aquinas talked about the reality of God in this way, and Friedrich Schleiermacher did something very similar. But talk about what is the ultimate good, and that is whatever is the greatest good you can think of. Well, that's God. And how have we best seen that ever demonstrated? We've all known some people that we thought were good. We've all known some people we thought were kind. But when we look at a historical perspective of who demonstrated that the best, that comes down to Jesus. And Jesus identified himself both as God and as the Son of God. And as the video we watched, he said, "You want to know what God looks like? Look at me." And he was the perfect example of kindness, of love, of service, of healing, of anything that we think is good. That's who he was.
So Frank, I do want to follow up with what you said. Yes, you know those stories. You were lucky. Millions pray, still starve and die. If you see any proof of divine intervention, or if you see any proof of divine intervention, I don't. I would say that we have zero proof for Jesus or Zeus or L or EL. I'm not sure how that's
L, probably for El Elyon. So
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, ancient Assyrian understanding of who God is. So
gotcha. You don't have Discord. Okay, no worries. And I did just want to give you that invitation, and of course, I would love to invite you to keep coming back. We're gonna do these videos every Thursday at 7:30 Central Time for the next several weeks. We're also going to put them on not Discord, on YouTube, so that if you didn't catch them, you can go back and watch them, and then decide for yourself. Yeah, this is still bogus, or you know what? Maybe there is something to this, and explore it further. You know me. Hello. How are you? Welcome. Sorry, I didn't say that sooner. I didn't want to be rude and interject. So. El is your God, or Yahweh, Old Testament. They are also gods from ancient Egypt. Weird. Won't you say it's like they were copied? I personally don't believe that they were copied. That's I believe that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life, and I believe that it is through him that that we are saved. That we are all in need of a savior, and we're all broken.
Yeah, and I think what Frank is when he's talking about El here is referring back to is there when we look at the Old Testament, when we look at the Hebrew writings and the understanding, and when we look at other ancient literature, there was kind of this pantheon, you could say. Some people call it a divine council, that El was over the divine council, and as the name for God, and we see that in different names throughout Scripture, like Elijah, Daniel, Elisha. Where God El is, being the name of God, is inserted in there, and that there are other references to El Shaddai, El Elyon, Elohim. These are all different understandings for various names of God that today we just translate them as Lord or as God. That it's all the same person, but there are some what's the word I'm looking for? Literary critics or scholars that look at it and say, well, these could have been different understandings of different gods throughout different areas of Mesopotamia. So drawing back to that, but I would kind of hand something back though to Frank. Then when we think about creation versus where things come from, where I would ask you, where did things come from? We talk about our understanding of science and how the universe is expanding from the Big Bang, and I'm not arguing for or against that. Um, I'm not arguing for or against creation. I'm somebody that I'm one of those people that I don't have to take all scripture, especially the first 5 books, especially the chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis. I don't have to take those literal. My faith is not dependent on that. It's dependent on who God is and my experience with God. But when we think about where things came from, where did that come from? Where did matter come from? Where did the universe come from? And most scientists I'm aware of will have to agree that at some point in time there was a superhuman being that created it. So if that's the case, if that's the hypothesis, where did who would that be? So, but anyway, back to your statement of faith there of where you are now, Billy. So I mean, if you want to, I don't know if you want to go back to that. I'm just kind of interrupting you. I kind of wanted to hit more on some of his question.
No, I think I think that's that's important, and I think well, I know. Let me rephrase that. I know that you have a lot more experience in dealing with things like that than than I do. For me,
and that's the benefit of my education. I mean, you got
absolutely.
You got your counseling education that's going to be way beyond what I have as far as counseling education. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, my sharing of Jesus usually revolves around I start stream, I will read a devotional, then we'll play some games, and I close with prayer. So this is in some ways new territory for me, and
Yeah.
and so when the invitation was made to me, I was like, yeah, okay, and people are going to see this. Some of them will think more on it, and some will never think anything more about it beyond this channel or beyond this discussion tonight. And see, the Egyptian versions are way older. El was the upper god, and Yahweh was under him. Some of their old myths can also be found in perhaps everything always existed that doesn't point to God.
And that's a valid opinion for that. Yeah, when I was talking about the El, I wasn't just referring to the ancient Hebrew writings. There's the ancient there's the ancient Egyptian writings. There's the ancient Assyrian writings. There's there's the Epic of Gilgamesh, which has some mentionings of it. So which is one of the most ancient writings that we do have anything of. And if you ever read that, and I mean there are so many ancient stories that pertain to people's faith or religion or understanding of the world or of creation, even in the Bhagavad Gita, that talks about the destruction and recreation, and how we can read Genesis 1:1 when it says in the beginning God created. It can also be reread in the new beginning. God recreated. So ancient languages are a funny thing, and we still have so much to learn about that. But it is always fascinating to find across various ancient writings and things that we do have some different names in there. And yeah, when you're talking about El being the upper god and Yahweh under him, that's kind of goes back to that divine council that I mentioned. But those are some good points. I appreciate you sharing those, and this could be an interesting discussion that we talk about it some. So But I don't. Also, you know, not here to debate one way or the other. I'm here to help people explore questions and thoughts, and you know, tonight we're talking about Jesus. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, again, this is designed kind of to help put it out there in an open platform where we can discuss who is Jesus, what did he you know, like I said, the next episode will be why did Jesus die, and there's several more, but that we'll explore. But it's meant to kind of be that introduction, kind of get people thinking, not necessarily to twist your arm and say, "Oh man, you're a horrible person if you don't accept what I believe," because no nobody nobody comes to salvation by being forced to do it. They might say they do, but they don't. There is no true acceptance.
yeah, it's not sincere. It's, you know, it's intellectually dishonest.
Storm blessed. Are you know me? And if you are, I do indeed know you. How you doing, man? You are okay. How have you been? Long time no see. Doing well, like your discussion. Thank you. This is in partnership with alphausa.org. Um, and some other partners as well. Oh, oh yeah, I did type that right. I thought I fat fingered it for a moment. But as part of ReachConf, been good. Moving to Texas in July. Oh man, it's gonna be hot compared to what you're used to. But congratulations, man.
Where at in Texas? Don't dox yourself, but just, you know, major city or metropolitan area. Texas is big.
Closer to
Okay.
Dallas. Okay.
Yeah, I lived in Dallas for 4 years. That was enough of that for me, but it can be a great place.
I'm gonna
Yeah, that
go.
was the thing when we moved down to Dallas, that we found that the humidity wasn't as high, but the temperature was about 10 degrees higher, so it made up for it.
Yeah.
And there was so much, you know, we were used to living in the River Valley area there in Arkansas or in the Tulsa River Valley area, and that
Storm blessed isn't even used to that kind of heat.
oh man. Oh,
he's,
prayers for you then.
he's in a world of hurt when he moves to Dallas, at least as far as weather's concerned. But
and all that pavement makes it even worse, in my opinion.
So I'm gonna transition to this other screen, guys. If you guys can see this, should be able to. But these are the videos that we have. We covered episode 1. Is there more to life than this? If you didn't catch that, that is on our YouTube platform. And tonight we did episode 2, which is who is Jesus? And then of course next Thursday we'll be taking a look at why did Jesus die? And of course all this is designed to engage in genuine discussion and all of that. So I just thought I'd share that with you guys if anybody's curious about, okay, what's next? Why are we doing this? Not all of our streams will be centered around this, but all of our Thursday streams for the next several weeks will be at least at 7:30. Up to that point, it'll be, you know, a little bit of whatever, but probably Rocket League or anything of that nature. And more blessed, out of curiosity, did your trip to Dallas, or the Dallas regional area is, I assume that's for work. And if so, I guess we owe you a congratulations on that end. Got a job offer. Sweet. Congrats, man.
Awesome.
Glad to hear it. I don't want to cut anybody off, but at the same time, I do want to be mindful of Ashen's time. We've kind of set this up to be an hour, give or take. We are over that hour. Last week we were under that hour, so we're alternating this time. Is there anybody that has any other questions, comments, concerns that we can discuss before we conclude?
You know, when I finish a staff meeting, I go, questions, comments, snide remarks.
Yeah. And of course, guys, we are on Discord. If you guys don't have Discord, that's okay too. But if you do have Discord, feel free to jump in with us. It's about having discussions. This isn't about telling the other person that they're right or wrong or smart or stupid or anything like that. It's just opening up a discussion. And you know, I think we live in a time where it can be difficult to have discussions where we disagree with somebody, especially over big things like various rights, various political issues, and of course religion.
It's good stuff. I want to say thanks, Storm, for chiming in, and Frank, thank you for your questions and your comments. Really appreciate it, and your engagement has been a blessing to me tonight. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Billy, thank you for the time and for hosting this, and I appreciate you guys. I'm going to call it a night. It has been a long day, but this has been a good way to end it. So you all take care.
You have a wonderful night. God bless you. Frank said that he presumes that if we were born in India, that you would have another God, probably many, at least until I come. This is my thoughts. Probably many, at least until I came to know who Jesus was. So this shows that it's just culture. I do agree that there is a culture aspect to it. The idea of dying and rising gods who die for our sins and who did miracles was nothing new. I also agree that statement is true, that it is nothing new. But I do believe that Jesus did come. He did do what he came to do. He is who he said he was. The 300 plus prophecies that he fulfilled, as outlined in that video, 29 of them in one day, including where he was born, where he was buried, where he died, all that, how his body wasn't broken, and all that is conclusive evidence for me. And ultimately, you have that choice to say it's not conclusive enough for you, or it is conclusive for you. Either way is your choice. And Frank, you're awesome, and I appreciate your tact and openness to have this discussion. I know it's not easy, so sincerely, thank you.